Hello everyone, and welcome to another installment of Shower Thoughts, the budget commander series that proves Magic isn't pay to win. In this week's video, I'm going to talk about 10 commanders that can be both powerful and inexpensive. They aren't listed in any particular order, and if you'd like to see a budget deck tech on any of these commanders, let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you can give this video a like, it really helps out the channel. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. First up is Magda, Brazen, Outlaw. Magda makes a fantastic budget commander for several reasons. First, she's a low mana value, meaning you should be casting her on turn 2 pretty much every game, allowing you to utilize her ability as early as turn 2. Second, she's both ramp and a win condition in the command zone. Her ability to generate treasures synergizes well with both artifact strategies, and you get to play a funky tribe in dwarves. There are some expensive dwarves, such as Dwarven Bloodboiler or Dwarven Armorer, but a majority of them tend to be bulk. While her second ability is a built-in win condition, allowing you to cheat massive threats into play. Sadly, Portal to Phyrexia isn't really budget, but you still get to cheat threats such as Mere Battlesphere, Phyrexian Triniform, or Graz's Unstoppable Juggernaut. She is a great toolbox commander that I'd highly recommend you try out. Some key cards to include are Smuggler's Copter, Clock of Omens, Clown Car, God Pharaoh Statue, and Idol of Oblivion. Next up is Finn the Fangbearer. One of the reasons I love Finn as a budget commander is how easily it can win games and his low mana value. To win, you only need to hit each opponent 5 times with Death Touch creatures. If you can give your creatures Double Strike and or Trample, it gets even easier. Since his ability specifies combat damage, Double Strike will give someone 4 poison counters instead of just 2, and Trample with Death Touch will almost guarantee your creature deals combat damage. And you don't need expensive creatures to have the deck function. Even 1 mana value creatures such as Moss Viper will still give your opponents 2 poison counters. Some key cards to include would be Skullwinder, Bellowing Tangleworm, Overrun, Roar of Challenge, and Prowler's Helm. Next up is Helana and Elena Partners. Originally, I wanted to suggest Minsc and Boot, but I didn't realize how expensive that card has gotten. While they aren't as powerful as the cute hamster, they still pack a pretty nasty punch on a budget and give you multiple build paths. The first one I thought of was Extra Combats, since their ability triggers at the start of combat. The biggest issue is the price of extra combat spells, the cheapest two being Aki Battle Squad and Relentless Assault. I would make sure to include those in your list even if you don't focus on extra combats. The other, and much cheaper option, is Modified Creatures. There is already a Gruul Precon from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty that makes an excellent starting point for this commander. Some key cards to include would be Kami of Whispered Hopes, Champion of Lampholt, Invigorating Hot Springs, Thundering Raiju, and Prodigious Growth. Next up is Baba Lysaga, Night Witch. Baba quickly became one of, if not my favorite Golgari deck to play. I was introduced to her thanks to Joey from EDH Rec and haven't looked back. The best thing about her is the variety of ways you can build her. You can focus on having ways to untap her multiple times in a turn, or do what I do, and make it into a pseudo lands deck with extra land cards. Or focus on making one card into 3 types for the most value. Lands can get a bit pricey if you want to include cards such as Crucible of Worlds or Exploration. I would highly recommend her if you're looking for an interesting commander, and you love to draw cards and gain life. And then make sure after watching this video to check out my budget version of the deck, where I go in depth with card choices and play patterns. Some key cards to include would be Silver Smote Ghoul, Psychosis Crawler, Genju of the Fens, Genju of the Cedars, and Mishra's Factory. Next is Thalys, Reverent Medium. Orzhov tokens is a tried and true theme, and I'd suggest everyone try it at least once. Being an uncommon might turn you off to her. After all, there are some great options such as Elenda the Dusk Rose and Teysa Karlov. But don't let that rarity fool you. She's a powerhouse and will take over games in a flash. Since her ability doesn't care what kind of tokens were made, and triggers at the beginning of each end step, you'll want to either create tokens at instant speed, or make a lot of them in one turn. Oftentimes, people win by sacrificing tokens and draining the table with Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat. But I think buffing and attacking with a massive army of spirits is a better option on a budget. Some key cards to include would be Corpse Knight, Nadir Agent of Dusknell, Nadir's Nightblade, Theldar Retreat, and Rabble Rousing. Next is Hoffrey Ghostforge. A great way to play a budget deck that can keep up with even the most powerful decks is by stealing an opponent's creature. Hoffrey is my favorite thief deck of all time, and for good reason. His ability scales depending on the power level of the table. If someone has an Avenger of Zendikar, why not take it and make it your own? A player cheated an Elishnorn Grand Cenobite into play? It's yours now. When building this deck on a budget, you should include as many active trees and effects as possible, along with sacrifice outlets. As for the creatures in your deck, focus on creatures that draw cards or wield the table when they enter. The other option is building something akin to Spirit Tribal, since he does give your spirits a buff. And finally, you can try a sneak attack build to cheat big creatures into play, but that isn't necessarily budget. Some key cards to include would be Fanatical Devotion, Quintorius Field Historian, Solemn Simulacrum, Active Aggression, and Spirited Companion. Next on my list is Carter Doom Scourge. The ability to force combat can be incredibly disruptive to a game by forcing people to either attack with key creatures they want to hold back, or just lowering the life totals so certain strategies become much more risky. You might look at him and think that's a commander that you want to attack with. However, I look at him as a Rakdos control commander instead. By forcing combat, not only do you gain card advantage when other creatures die, but your life total is safe from attacks. Of course, players can't point the removal towards you, but if they're at low enough life, they might need to remove a card that can knock them out of the game instead. If you want to try speeding up your games, give this commander a try. Some key cards to include would be Agitator Ant, Life of the Party, Geode Rager, Bloodthirsty Blade, and Kaya's Ghost Form. Next is Tivit, Seller of Secrets. One of the things I look for when picking a budget commander is what does the card offer? Does it provide value such as card draw or ramp, or is it the win condition of the deck? Tivit is the former in this case. They are pure value in the command zone, and it uses a mechanic that I believe is underutilized in Magic and Commander in general, voting. Aside from Tivit, there are 16 cards in Esper colors that give you the option to vote. Most of these cards aren't too expensive, the primary exceptions being Expropriate and Coercive Portal. I would build a Voting Matters deck on a budget by including all the creatures that either pay off voting or give you additional votes. And then I'd include spells to copy instants or sorceries that make everyone vote, and then flicker effects to vote repeatedly using Tivit's ability. Some key cards to include would be Ballot Broker, Brago's Representative, Illusion of Choice, Plea for Power, and Grudge Keeper. Next is Ginny Faye, Jetmir II. Have you ever noticed most dog people aren't also cat people, but most cat people are also dog people? Well, thankfully Ginny Faye doesn't make you pick between cats or dogs. She lets you turn whatever token you want, whether it be food, clue, treasure, or incubate tokens, into dogs or cats. I'm partial to the cat tokens, that is strictly due to the stats, and has nothing to do with me having cats, I swear. And with the introduction of March of the Machine, we have a new incubate token, which will enter with a number of +1/+1 counters. Well, there's a cute interaction where if you make those tokens into cats or dogs, it will also enter with the counters. So why not build Ginny Faye Incubate? All of these new Incubate cards are inexpensive. The other idea I had was building a living weapon or 4 Mirrodin deck by turning all of the germs and their rebels into cats and dogs. Whichever option you go with, there will be some cards you'll want to include in both lists. Some of these key cards are Rabble Rousing, Call the Coppercoats, Nyla Sun's Vanguard, Rumor Gatherer, and Impact Tremors. And finally, Haldon and Paco. Speaking of dogs, Haldon and Paco don't mess around. These best buds are a fast and powerful duo that even on a budget will dominate games. Much like Hoffrey, this deck can scale with the table since you get to take other people's cards. Just be careful when playing this commander since you are likely to get focused down if you jump too far ahead. And you'll want to make sure to load up ways to protect Paco, manipulate the top of your library with cards like Brainstorm, and then quickly end once you get a lead. This deck is not for those who want to build a big board of beaters. And don't forget, Haldon lets you play the cards, meaning you can play lands you steal from your opponents. Some key cards to include would be Memory Lapse, Aqueous Form, Summer Bloom, Teamer Battle Range, and Kedis Emberclaw Familiar. And with that, thanks for watching. Special thanks to my patrons shown on screen here. If you'd like to join them in supporting the channel, you can find my Patreon link down below. To support the channel for free, just give this video a like if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and leave a comment. This has been Ben with Bathroom Brews MTG, and remember, always wash your hands.